right, it is pretty cool to be here today and have a chance to have a chat with you guys about something that I really don't know much about. And that is Gibraltar's deep, deep future. Sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it? It's really just referring to Gibraltar, not in the next 10 years, not in the next 20 years or 50 years, but rather what Gibraltar will look like in the next 200 years, 400 years, 10,000 years. Yeah. It was quite a tough task to come up with stuff. So I found 3 approaches that might work. The first one was looking at global trends with regards to technology and geology, etc., and see whether I could spin that into some good form of stand-up comedy. I told my friends about it. They laughed. I told them my jokes. They didn't. So here we are today. Huh? Well, I mean, I could give you an example of like some of them, because obviously we're looking at technology. We're trying to figure out what might happen. And so when you think of technologies, you might think of, life extension and longevity. And I mean, when I think of that, I think of the implications of an invention like that to Gibraltar. I can see it now. The year is 2132, and running for re-election is Sergio Bolsonaro. Or we might have something like self-driving cars, which is quite an interesting technology, which might actually be here in the next 15 years. And that would have huge implications on how we move from one place to another. And specifically in Gibraltar, one, it would lower the cost for Hungry Monkey, right? That's one thing, that's pretty good. The second thing that it might do is it would really change our notion of spins. That's quite something. And the third thing would be, I mean, we may get self-driving cars, but obviously knowing ourselves, we'd end up with 40,000 cars for 30,000 people, because that's how we do. So, obviously, I'm not going to do that. So the second approach, which is quite typical of me, was more based on visions and imagination and exploring what Gibraltar's future might actually look like in that time. And as I was looking at it, one, it's really hard to figure this stuff out. And two, I realized that it was very typical of me to fall for this bias in which I get deluded by a certain set of visions that are many lifetimes ahead. But in actuality, that's not what matters. What matters is the step-by-step process that we take on a day-to-day basis today. Because the future is not some place that we get to explore or we get to visit. It's a place that we get to create. And so that brought me to my third process for exploring Gibraltar's future, and that is looking at what ideas will dominate when it comes to, one, the challenges, and two, the adventures that we can create for ourselves in the long term. And so when I looked at that, I felt, all right, let's see. There's at the highest level, 2 main problems, or 2 ways of looking at this, right? The first problem that we will have to solve, which is an ongoing problem, is what I would define as the turkey problem, right? You have a turkey. Turkey's a really smart guy, wears glasses, he's an economist, statistician, likes his numbers. And for the 1,267 days that turkey has been alive for, he's been able to get a chart that predicts exactly how much food he gets fed on a day-to-day basis, and the future looks wonderful. If you were to imagine the chart, you have a square there. It's positive. Everything looks good, right? But unfortunately, the next day is Thanksgiving. And so that turkey gets slaughtered. Now, that turkey had no reasonable reason to think, oh, the game's going to end tomorrow, because he'd run all the numbers. But the truth is, in many ways, given the risks that we can face in the future, we are facing a turkey problem when it comes to avoiding the potential for our slaughter. Wow, that sounds bad. But yeah, so that's the first problem. The second one is more exciting and inspiring, right? And that is, as opposed to the Turkey problem, where we try our best to continue playing this game, the second area is looking at how we can play this game in the most exciting and awesome way possible without restraints. And that has more to do with what is it that will excite us when it comes to looking at tomorrow? What processes can we engage in on a day-to-day basis that could be considered to be the stuff of fiction, but we've been able to put our minds to it and get it done? And so those are the two paradigms through which I see this. And I think that there are a few ideas that we could integrate into our thinking and into our actions that will hopefully enable us to solve these ongoing, I wouldn't use the word problems, but dilemmas. And so when I think about it, from the sets of problems, I think the first way to look at it is by understanding that Gibraltar is uniquely positioned to actually deal with many of these issues. We aren't, the UK, we aren't, for instance, like the United States, where they have major problems because of their economies of scale and the difficulties in communicating amongst one another. In Gibraltar, you know everyone from the beach, from main streets, from Speak Freely, right? So that's one good thing. So when I think of Gibraltar and its core advantage, it's economies not of scale, but economies of small. And there are three main components to this. The first component being the idea of, once again, communication. In Gibraltar, the limits that most other nations have when it comes to communicating and understanding certain ideas that come from different individuals, we don't have the limit of too many people, right? And this is a very fundamental idea, because communication is, for instance, what helped the best armies in the 1600s. Better communication is, for instance, what allows for ideas to spread in a better way. And better communication is not just about communicating more, but rather communicating more effectively. And because of Gibraltar's size, we're in a special position to do that, right? That's the first thing. The second idea is the idea of integration, right? And when I talk about integration, what I'm talking about is the ideas from other countries. When you look around the world, there are tens of hundreds of experiments going on a day-to-day basis in how we can do things better. And because of our size, we can be agile and honest enough to realize that we have things to learn, for instance, from Singapore, and we have things that we should not learn, for instance, from Venezuela. So the capacity to integrate and to learn, not just on the nation-state level, by the way, but also on the level of very, very local organizations. For instance, when it comes to education, you ask the question of why can't we have the best education system in the world? And as opposed to accepting the conventional wisdom from UK bureaucrats. And the way you go about doing that is figuring out what are the best, not education systems, but the best schools in the world, and seeing what they do in terms of culture, in terms of curriculum, etc. And the third idea is the idea of anti-fragility. Now, there are three categories of things. One category is glass. If I drop it, it breaks. When you have an external stressor, it shatters. There's another category of things, right? That's fragile. The other category is robustness. Robustness is something that, upon stress, it remains the same. It's indifferent. But the anti-fragile takes its philosophy from Kelly Clarkson. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that idea is quite a unique one, because if you integrate ideas of experimentation into, and you embed them within our institutions, there is a way in which you can conduct these processes that, in the long run, means no matter how much volatility we face, because we understand what our unique advantages are, and we understand who we are able to become stronger as a result of these things. And it's one of the greatest ideas out there. Now, those were the main ideas, but it seems like I've got quite a bit of time. So, I'll give you another one. One more idea is the idea of a day one mindset, right? The day one mindset is the kid who goes back to school after getting bad grades in August and says, I'm ready, to study and stuff for the following month. Day one mindset is January in the gym when it's packed. And the reason why day one mindset is important, or the only way in which it can be important, is if you carry it throughout, right? A day one mindset doesn't work when it's only day one. A day one mindset works when you carry it on to day 100, a day 10,000, day 17,000, right? So having a day one mindset is what allows us to have the humility, allows us to look at things as a beginner and look at them from first principles, not based on conventional wisdom, not based on what other people assume by convention, but rather trying to reconstruct things and understand them in a better way. I've forgotten the rest of this. I actually have. So I guess that's it. It's been a long day. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry, man.
That's all.